Against the backdrop of preparations for dictator Vladimir Putin's visit to China, Russian propaganda is now trying to present this visit as something historic. But it turned out that China has officially refused the Russian gas project Power of Siberia-2, into which the Kremlin has already invested billions of dollars. Now Xi Jinping is demanding that Putin send more gas to China through the already existing routes. Vladimir Putin will go to China over the weekend to ask Xi Jinping to buy more resources from Russia. But even before he left Moscow, it became clear that his much-cherished project to build a second Power of Siberia gas pipeline to China once again has no chance of being implemented. It's true that China is considering the possibility of increasing the flow by 15% through the existing pipeline, but this can only be done in the next decade. But as for the Grand Power of Siberia-2 project, China has suggested putting an end to it. And yet, the Kremlin had been promoting this project for several years as a lifeline for the Russian economy after Europe stopped buying Russian pipeline gas. The Chinese now say they don't need Power of Siberia 2 and won't discuss it. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 29th. We'll talk about this in more detail in this episode. There are a lot of interesting details. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, as has been known for a long time, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is going to Beijing to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Asia. Xi Jinping is holding a military parade on September 3 and has invited Putin. Earlier, it was reported that he also expects Donald Trump in Beijing. But no matter how much Russian propaganda tries to present Putin's visit to Beijing as a victory, the Russian dictator will not be Xi Jinping's most honored guest. Of course, Russian soldiers will march in the parade on September 3rd together with the Chinese, just as the Chinese marched on Red Square in Moscow on May 9th. And Putin will be able to meet with Xi Jinping, whose call he avoided after meeting with Donald Trump in Alaska. But the guest of honor will be the American president. If he makes it there, Putin will play more of a ceremonial role, nothing more. Putin also intends to show off at the parade, where Russian soldiers will be present alongside Chinese and North Korean troops, as well as at the two-day Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, which will begin in Tianjin on August 31. Trump, of course, was not invited there because it is a strictly anti-American alliance. Iran's participation alone speaks volumes. Here, Putin will be posing for photographers between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Both are the biggest buyers of Russian oil, despite, by the way, American pressure. We'll discuss energy resource purchases further. But regardless of whether Donald Trump will even agree to come to China, and whether in that case he will meet with Putin and discuss with him Russia's aggression against Ukraine, Putin will still have to talk about Ukraine. Beijing has been showing more open support for Russia recently. Chinese diplomats openly say that China will not allow the Russians to be defeated. And now they need not only a reliable rear in case of a war over Taiwan. Russia is increasingly pushing the idea of having Chinese peacekeepers in Ukraine. Officially, Kyiv is of course against it. Beijing is clearly open to gaining influence in Europe through its military presence. Being right on the European Union's borders and west of Russia is a real dream for the Chinese. Formally, Russia needs this as well right now. Well, it's much more convenient than NATO troops, but that's a separate topic. In this episode, we'll discuss energy. So, the energy issue will be one of the important topics when Putin and Xi Jinping meet next week. But negotiations over building the Power of Siberia-2 project have stalled. According to Reuters sources, a breakthrough in the discussion of the $13.6 billion project with a capacity of 50 billion cubic meters per year is not expected. China has instead suggested boosting the capacity of the Power of Siberia-1 pipeline, which is already running at its full 38 billion cubic meters. And here I should remind you that Vladimir Putin has long been boasting to Russians that once they build the Power of Siberia-2 pipeline, life will get much better. Because almost all our gas will be sold to our partner, that is China. After all, our partner will never abandon us. And that's it. Europe will definitely freeze then. Yes, it hasn't frozen so far. even though it hardly uses Russian gas anymore, but then it will definitely freeze. By the way, the unwashed Russians who still come to watch my content, so how's it going over there? Your logic makes sense. Europe didn't freeze. Remember in 2020 and 2021 when you said Europe and Ukraine would freeze without Russian gas, but no one did. That's how it turns out. It turns out you're just inflated bubbles that actually aren't worth anything at all. The whole world can easily live without you. But despite negotiations going on for more than 10 years, Moscow and Beijing have not been able to agree on gas prices or financing for the new pipeline. The thing is, China has stated that it won't provide any money for the pipeline. Basically, let Moscow build the pipeline itself, but China demands the right to set the price for purchasing Russian gas unilaterally. The Chinese say they'll offer the price they're willing to pay for Russian gas once the Power of Siberia-2 pipeline is completed, and if the Russians aren't satisfied with that price, then the Chinese simply won't buy the gas. The Chinese side suggested increasing supplies through the existing Power of Siberia-1 pipeline by 6. Wouldn't it cost 8 million, 1 meter, 1A? According to Reuters calculations, if implemented, this project could bring Gazprom an additional $1.5 billion based on an average gas price of $250 per 1,000 cubic meters. For comparison, the price of gas in Europe is now $391 per 1,000 cubic meters, which means China is already buying Russian gas at a discount of almost $150 per 1,000 cubic meters. Why wouldn't they have kept trading with Europe? Everything would have been fine. They wouldn't have started wars worldwide or invaded Ukraine and could have kept trading gas with Europeans for higher profits. But instead, the Russians attacked their neighbor and now sell gas to China at a discount, yet even here, they shouldn't celebrate too soon. China is ready to increase gas purchases through the existing Power of Siberia pipeline, but not now, starting from 2031. Why is that? Because China doesn't have a particular need for additional volumes of imported gas. In recent years, China has significantly increased its own production, its economy is slowing down, and the rapid expansion of the renewable energy sector is breaking all records. This year, China hasn't imported any liquefied natural gas from the United States at all, even though it had been increasing those imports in previous years. After Donald Trump started the first trade war during his first presidential term. In addition, in Beijing, out of concern for energy security, they don't want to become overly dependent on any single supplier, even if it's the Russians. Here's where it gets interesting. Russians are being told Vladimir Putin has once again outsmarted and beaten everyone. Europe didn't freeze, but he still beat everyone. But the truth is that even if the Power of Siberia-1 pipeline increases its capacity to 44 billion cubic meters per year starting from 2031, taking into account the new pipeline from Sakhalin with a capacity of 10 billion cubic meters, which might be launched in 2027. Or maybe not. Gazprom's total supplies to China will amount to only a third of its pre-war exports to European Union countries. Only a third. And don't forget about the $150 discount for China for every 1,000 cubic meters. Meanwhile, the European bloc is preparing a plan to completely get rid of Russian gas by the end of 2027. As a result, Gazprom will lose the remaining supplies through the Turk Stream pipeline in the same volume that it could theoretically pump to China in the next decade. About a third comes from the Power of Siberia. Of what they used to have, they've got now. In summary, Vladimir Putin's ambitions to build and launch Power of Siberia-2, despite billions invested, have completely collapsed. The Chinese have clearly stated that they don't need a new pipeline, and I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.